Teachers, what was your OF? That's impressive, but I do still have to punish this kid. Moment. I teach a tech certification class here for a local nonprofit. Just a week or so ago, I was walking the students through using Task Scheduler in Windows when my phone started to blow up with emails. Turns out one of the students created a dozen scheduled tasks to send me an email every 5 minutes. Title: Cats, 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 cats. Body: cats, 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 cats. You get the picture. Needless to say, his punishment came in the form of a scheduled task running as a service on his PC that randomly ejects the optical drive at different intervals. He has not figured out why this is happening yet, and it's forcing him to learn how to troubleshoot an issue, so I do see it as a win. In the grand scheme of things, he'll learn a good lesson. Also, you got a lot of cats, or just the word cats. I actually got a prank messaging service once from my father, who for months kept making fake phone numbers and would send me cat facts every hour on the hour. So I'm no stranger to the random cat message. I got no revenge though, it just sort of drove me insane. Next story. First 6 months of teaching. Grade 8 English. Kid did a 360 on one leg of his chair. I was very impressed, but I gave him a timeout because it was dangerous. Part of the requirement for timeout was that students identify what got them sent out in the first place. I did a mad 360 on my chair, but Miss said it wasn't safe. I've still got that timeout sheet on my desk 2.5 years later. Yes, Ethan, it was a mad 360, but it was still dangerous. Okay, first off, baller. Second, I was homeschooled, so I don't know how the system works. Were kids still getting timeouts in 8th grade? Next story. ESL teacher here. So I teach high school ESL class, where most of my students either don't speak any English or they speak very little. I had a student in there who was constantly disruptive and liked to bully the other kids to establish his manliness. One day, the disruptive kid is doing his normal annoying shtick, and out of nowhere, my quiet little Latina in the corner of the room, in the clearest pronounced English I've ever heard her speak, said, "You stupid mother effer." I had to hold in a laugh. I then had a quick convo with her and congratulated her on the clear pronunciation, but also told her that she couldn't say that in class. Edit. Since people keep asking me, I did deal with the troublemaker after that lesson was over. I pulled him outside and gave him an ultimatum, and when he did it again, he got sent to ISS, in-school suspension. I just didn't include that part because it didn't have anything to do with the question. Also, in high school, acknowledging the troublemaker in the middle of his troublemaking just fuels the fire more. And sometimes, ignoring the kid at the moment and talking to him later works much better. Next story. My husband used to work in school Aftercare. One time, he saw 2 kids starting to fight in the sandpit. He headed over trying to calm them down, but while he was on his way, one kid ran at the other, who just calmly flipped the first kid over his head like a textbook martial arts move. My husband said he had to stop himself from shouting, "Wow, great job!" Next story. I had a classmate jump on the teacher's computer and visit a website that would go full screen and make it seem like it was a Mac now instead of a PC. It was April Fool's Day, and this was his prank. This was in 2003, so security wasn't like the conversation that it is today. Anyway, he still got in trouble. The teacher got really angry and kind of yelled at him to sit down in the corner. She called in the vice principal, then the principal, then the on-campus police office, and then when he was good and terrified, all 4 turned to him and said, "April Fools," and let him off the hook. He got his punishment, though he was absolutely terrified. Next story. A student in one of the schools I work at had a close to a full-service bar and smoke shop set up in a couple of lockers as you can get. The lockers were located in a corner of the hallway that is easily obscured and difficult to monitor. The kid just slapped his own locks on there and nobody noticed. When he was caught, the lockers were found to have several makeshift shelves in them and contained several bottles of hard liquor, some solo cups, paper shot glasses. The other contained a backpack containing some drugs and other paraphernalia that was all for sale. The kid had quite the little enterprise going, and God knows how much money he made before he got caught. I was shown of what was in the locker, some pictures, and I have to admit, given what he had to work with, it was quite an impressive setup. Of course, I'm sure he was brought up on a significant number of charges, but still, even the principal had to give him credit for the setup. Wow, that actually is impressive. You know, at a certain point, you have to respect the the business. Next story. My coworker and I discovered that one of our students was running an underground crime syndicate selling individual icebreaker mints for 50 cents a pop. We agreed not to punish him or inform the administration, but we did confront him privately and told him he needed to stop before it got him in trouble. He had about half a dozen employees and was selling at every grade level by the time we put an end to it. Kid was a C student at best, but he is definitely going places. Next story. I'm an art teacher. Had a student submit his art book with a great variety of different wang drawings. One was a rather impressive concoction of 2 cat heads as the testicles and a detailed furry shaft. As was the assessment, I had to ring his mother to let her know. Me. Your son has handed in his assessment and has chickens drawn all over it. Mother. I'm sorry you find my son's style of art offensive. Me. Personally, I am not offended. However, it does go against our school's graffiti policy. Edit. To clarify, this was in a public school in Australia. Public schools have book policy rules, and drawing giant dongs are classed under the graffiti policy on all property, even the student's own. And it is definitely a big no-no on assessment, even art. The student was supposed to be creating a design for sculpture in the school. Let's just say he had some rather interesting ideas. Next story. I was a new teacher at a school that had a demerit system. Do something bad, get a demerit. At the end of the week, get punished for every demerit over 3. One kid talked like a sailor. I gave lots of warnings to prevent him from being punished, and I just didn't want to see him get in trouble, but that didn't faze him. But he got the demerits. So Friday rolled around. Kid, how many demerits do I have? 4. What? What the heck for? For swearing. That's effing bullcrap! Next story. The first time I caught students cheating, it was 2 8th grade girls that had all of the same wrong answers on a vocabulary matching test. I pulled the girls aside after class to ask about it, and after some sheepish grins, they both admitted that a 3rd girl, their friend who was an A+ student, had fed them both incorrect answers on purpose. She screwed over her friends because she was upset that they were mooching. For punishment, the 2 first girls got to keep their very poor test grades, and the mastermind got a "your friends are mad at you" as her punishment. You know, natural consequences. Next story. I can't remember the question that was asked of my niece, about 6 at the time, but she stood up in the class and said, "Sister Bernadette's a female dog." And the sister, as in a nun. The teacher told my sister, normal sister, not a nun, that whilst she couldn't condone the behavior, Sister Bernadette was in fact a total female dog. They had a good laugh about it. Next story. In a school I used to work in, as a NET in Asia, there was a kid who was frequently in trouble, but at his core, he was a good kid. He was always late and failing exams, not doing homework, or having arguments with teachers over stuff. He just only argued if he genuinely felt the teacher was in the wrong. At times, they were. However, he was a genuine and funny kid, but just lacked motivation. He was also kind of picked on by a group of boys in his class. Now, as an English teacher, I assigned the kids into groups and asked them to write a song or a rap or a poem that they could perform for the class in English. This kid decided it was his chance to destroy the guys in his class for picking on him. He whipped out a rap that wrecked them, which included 2 lines. "Get all the chicks, but it's hard to please with the tiny..." I had to punish him, but gosh dang, I was impressed. Next story. Back in the day, my friend found an exploit in the school laptop that allowed him administrator access. It was pretty clever. He brought it up to IT. Problem was, it was very obscure and no one would have been looking for such an exploit unless they wanted to bypass the school's security. So he got suspended. Next story. I did the same thing in school, except that I didn't report it to IT. I used the admin's privs to install Quake 2 on onto the library computers and would set up a bunch of EN games there when other kids were in the library computer lab. I told everyone how to Alt plus Tab, and it was good fun, but we did get caught, and subsequently banned from using the library computers unsupervised. Loaded it on other computers in the school using the same exploit. It was great. There's nothing worse than a smart troublemaker. The power and ambition you possess without, the possible morals. Not that that's bad, but I'm just saying. Lots of evil geniuses out there, like I'm a law-abiding citizen, but, not because my heart's in the right place, but because I lack the IQ. Next story. Obligatory, not me, but I was there. Background. My principal was like mid-50s, always wearing suits. Christian high school, hey! He also had a lazy eye and a pot belly. Nothing too out of the ordinary. We have Spirit Week, and it's one of those days is Twin Day. So one kid decides to have an effing mad lad day and dress up as our principal. Bonus points, he was the only kid at school with a lazy eye. So this little punk shows up in a suit, a pillow stuffed underneath his shirt for the pot belly, and just calmly sat at his desk. My principal, also doubling as the math teacher, was turned and doing problems on the board. He turns back, sees this punk kid, turns back to the board, swallows the laugh, and turns back saying, "Better be glad I don't beat the kids in here, but you got detention." Punk kid served detention still in his suit and pillow gut and all. Edit, the kid was a known prankster in class. Like many teens, did not know where the line was drawn, even though most of the stunts he pulled were hilarious. Such examples include dressing up in a girl's cheerleading uniform to cheer the basketball team on, leaving for a huge tournament. Bringing Harry Potter to class. Banned because it promoted witches and warlocks and demons and visited Rowling and told her the spells so the book was, satanistic or something. Also, Pokemon was banned for promoting evolution. Got yo-yos banned for accidentally hitting a kid in class. Getting in a trash can and being wheeled around as he pretended to take pictures of people before spots and games. And putting a fart machine under another student's desk and continually setting it off during a test. Next story. Not a teacher, but when my mad lad English teacher was in school, he was voted in by his peers as perfect. After he promised them vending machines and pool tables, he then told everyone that he lied about putting in vending machines and pool tables and explained why democracy is inherently flawed. Next story. I was a student in class at the time, but we had this kid named Michael, and for whatever reason, some of the other kids called him Mickle, pronounced like pickle. In music class, a room designed for sounds to travel, a kid passed a note to him that said, "I'll give you a nickel if you tickle my pickle, Mickle." And the music teacher snatched it and read it aloud. I don't think she realized what she read until it was too late, but I could tell she was holding in a giggle. Next story. Not a teacher, but I remember in high school that a kid fought off a bully. His two friends tried to help beat him up, and the kid beat all three of them up. Jumps on one who started it, beat him till he couldn't open either eyes. The coach, who saw this, pulled him off, and once settled down asked him, "Did you do all this to them by yourself?" And the kid, still angry but pretty casually, goes, "And I'll effing do it again if these douchebags haven't learned anything." And the coach goes, "You may have to. I think you hit them so hard they're gonna have to learn their ABCs again too." Anyway, long story short, the kid got arrested and expelled. Never came back to school, but the coach said he was impressed and wished the kid only got suspended for a bit instead of expelled. I overheard the wrestling team saying that coach and the coach who split it up, gymnastics coach, had the security footage and would show it to their varsity teams. Only the initial bully got expelled too. He was a regular offender, hence why no one felt bad for him. His friends only got minor suspensions because they were trying to break it up and come to a friend's aid. I went to a 5A high school, pretty diverse, lots of fights. Next story. Not a teacher, but I work in IT in a big school. Guy came in asking us if we could put his PDFs in the right order. There was a bunch of comic book artwork that was part of his A-level art project. So we slotted all the pages into a nice PDF, and he promptly went off and printed several hundred copies to sell to his mates. We pulled him, as he was by far the biggest print user for the day, and he got some crap for it. Last I heard of him, he was demoing his comics at a festival in Germany, and doing rather well. Next story. Not a teacher, but teacher adjacent. I was on recess duty with a bunch of 7 to 9-year-olds one day, and this kid ran up to me to point out a couple of other kids fighting. I turned around. Yep, looked like a fight to me. As I went over there, a couple things stood out. The two fighting were besties, so it was already weird that they were fighting, and they were making sound effects. Dudes were playing out some epic Star Wars battle, complete with stick sabers and the blaster noises and everything. Their stunt coordination, though, was on point, y'all. I had to make them put down the sticks and holster their finger guns by rules. Okay, I should have sent them to the principal to be suspended for their finger guns, but that's ridiculous for consensual play acting, so no, I commended them on how real it all looked. Why did you have to holster their finger guns, man? You can't do finger guns at school? Sticks, maybe, right? They're 7 years old, but the finger guns, I mean, come on. Next story. After grading an exam, I realized 2 students were cheating because they had the same answer. I knew who had copied since one of them had straight A's all over the semester while the other was struggling, so as I did not see the cheat happening, I gave a chance to both come out and tell the truth. I said, okay, the one who copied will receive a 0, and the one who really did it will receive half the grade. So which of you really did get the original answer? I was expecting the cheater to come clean or the A student to try not get punished. The problem was that the cheater stayed in silence while the A student took the blame. Later that day, the A student called me to say his friend was going through hard times with his family and he needed some help with his grades. So he helped. I just realized I would be an awful teacher. I hope that kid was telling the truth, but I would be such a sucker for any little story like that. If anyone was just like, I was sad or my weekend was tough, I'd be like, I get it. You know what? Ace. Next story. In 9th grade, our school got a vending machine for soft drinks and water. They were all pretty dang expensive. And the pledge, I don't know if this is in the right translation or money, but you get back when you return it. It's whatever. All students and most of the teachers said it was too expensive and wanted it removed, because younger students spent all of their lunch money on one Sprite. The machine had a return slot for the empty bottles, so we ripped one label of one bottle and printed it like 1,000 times. Every time someone wanted to drink something, we put in 6 copies of the little paper in the machine and basically got a drink for free. It went down for about 2 weeks until one of the teachers caught us. We had to do detention, but a couple years after school, we met him again and he told us he really liked it because the soft drinks were way too expensive anyway. Next story. I was the punished student. Here we have some little stick, about 3 centimeters long and 5 millimeter diameter. Firecrackers that if you scratch them to a rough surface, it will create a little cracking sound. I invented a magnificent way to let them explode, put the firecrackers below a stone, then frickin' stomp it. Literally, the sound was like a flat tire and actually a bit deafening. I tried it outside my class. The principal was walking by. The whole school heard it, really. Every single eye was on me. The principal immediately dragged me to his office, threatened to call the police. I was underage, and firecrackers should only be used with adult supervision. And he did make a phone call, and I started crying my tears out, begging him to not call the police. A few years later, I realized that he was calling his family in his local language and dialect. Next story. In high school, a male senior went to his girlfriend with a guitar and some other boys as a chorus. It was Valentine, so everyone thought it was a love-filled melody for her. It was a ballad about how he found out she was effing his best friend and tried to have intimacy with his older brother. The chorus kept repeating some insulting language. The senior boy and his chorus were suspended, but most of the teachers could not stop themselves from laughing every time the incident was brought up. Next story. Our class teacher, I don't know what the right word is, he was basically the teacher responsible for us, really had to hold back his laughter when punishing a guy in my class. That dude managed to redneck engineer a smoke bomb that made the classroom unusable for 2 days in all of 15 minutes. We all probably inhaled some not-so-healthy fumes that day, but dang, it was impressive, especially when comparing it to the YouTube tutorial he followed. Next story. I taught computer science for 6 years in the UK. On this occasion, I was teaching IT, and the task I had given them all day was to design a logo for a shop that specializes in renting everything you could need for a school prom. Sounds great, right? So basically, everyone apart from this one guy is doing great. This lad being one of those students that just takes the freaking urine constantly and is often a trouble for random things. He's tough to keep motivated, but this lesson he's actually doing work. Amazing. He asked me to check out his work a few minutes later. What do I see? Prom Hub, in the exact black and orange coloring of the adult content hub on a rectangle background. Now, normally it's like, boom, detention, that's not appropriate, but there's literally no way this kid is going to have the power of knowing that I know what that adult site is. They just cannot know that I know, so I'm immediately blank-faced and I say, oh yeah, I love the orange there. Could you change the wording as well to maybe something that has a bit of alliteration? So solid orange, right, and, the name changed slightly, but nice work. Him and his mate were grinning like absolute madmen, but I'm not giving them this. No way were I going to let them crack me. I went to the office quick to grab a brew, told my boss who was on the floor laughing. Anyway, back in the lesson now the same student asks me to check out his work again, whilst still grinning like a Cheshire cat. Directly in my face were the words, "You prom!" Once again, I had to hold down that beast which wanted to burst out into manic laughter. I managed to poker face the crap out of this and said, "Excellent work. You've really seemed to have enjoyed this lesson." And wrapped it up immediately, told the rest of the department it was a favorite for sure. I informed the relevant safeguarding leads in school as it's a mature reference that needs to be noted. They did follow up with the student about it, but I can't remember what happened. This is a great story to tell though, and my boss was in literal tears when I was telling it, so yeah, hope you lot enjoy. Next story. Boy in my class, seniors, U.S. high school, came to school in a Playboy t-shirt with a fully naked woman on the front. I sent him to the office to change, and he came back mad. I told him to sit down, continue his work. He kept grumbling, and then suddenly stood up and said to the entire class, "Raise your hand if you think my shirt is offensive, and you think it's bullcrap that I had to change." Before I could say anything, a girl at another table whipped around and completely went off on him. She was saying, "Yes, I found your shirt offensive. No, you're not as rebellious or as cool as you think. You're selfish, and I think that buying from the Playboy brand makes you a playboy with your greasy, stupid hair and your beer belly at 18, so shut the F up and don't wear pictures of naked women on your t-shirt. Is there a single woman in this class that finds you or that shirt attractive? Raise your hand." And then a long pause, as we all sat there in complete silence. The boy was a major turd and gross, and I felt everything that the girls said, but I still had to ask both of them about disruptions and yelling in the class. Check that out. Classmates serving out justice. Kid got dunked on. Next story. I was working in a daycare, severely overworked with bad helpers and no teachers that day. All while, all the doors were open because it was parents-teachers conference night. Had a mom come in and we couldn't find her son, so it started off casual like, oh, he's probably in the bathroom, before we started panicking, realizing that we couldn't find him. The problem was, the last person I saw him with was a boy he wasn't supposed to be hanging out with, because the boy had physically attacked him the day before. So I didn't want the mom to know that they were playing. So we spent the longest 10 minutes of my life searching for this kid before the bully knocks him out of an art cart where he had hidden. As his mom broke down in tears, he casually explained that he was playing hide and seek against the bully. The mom was too happy she didn't care that he was playing with said bully. Also, thankful that I worked with this kid in another program, so his mom knew that this wasn't my fault. I was impressed that the kid stayed hidden even as we screamed his name, and equally impressed that the bully found the kid in a near impossible spot to find him. Next story. Teaching 8th grade. Reading is always an adventure, so I have many stories that would fit. Usually 90% of my classes were the bad kids. Anyways, this was 8th grade. One dude was a total jackweasel to literally everyone. He was aging out of 8th grade, so he knew no matter what he did, he'd move on to high school. He was also one of the main bullies of the hallway. Parents always took his side. "My sweet baby would never do that," etc. One day, he told one of the girls in his class that she wasn't really black. They were both mixed, and the girl looked at him, looked at the line of teachers, and shouted, "You know his parents won't let him get crap for that," and jumped him. And I mean really jumped him. By the time the teachers broke them up, she had a scratch on her arm, and he had a black eye, a busted lip, several bruises, etc. Apparently, when they got to the office, she jumped him again because he dared to look at her. They both ended up being suspended for 5 days. When he came back, he was telling everyone he just didn't feel right fighting a girl back. His track record said otherwise. So did the video. The 8th grade principal totally let all the 8th grade teachers see the video and everyone cheered for her. While none of us condoned the fighting, we knew that it was the wake-up call that he needed. If he had pulled that same crap at the high school, he very well may not have walked out. He didn't bully anyone the rest of the year, and his grades ended up going up by nearly 20 points in every class. The girl was basically treated as royalty by her classmates for the rest of the year. Next story. Not the teacher, but I was the kid. In class with 2 students, and we're being the usual, 15-year-old a-holes that just want to disrupt the class for no particular reason. We eventually decree that we'll just leave. Teacher declares loudly that we'll be suspended if we walk out that door. So we cross the room and jump out the window instead. Unsurprisingly, we end up in the principal's office in fairly short order, where said principal walks in, takes a seat at his desk, fixing the 3 of us with his most practiced look of being unimpressed. Principal: "Gentlemen, any reason why I shouldn't suspend you all immediately?" Me, in a moment of inspiration: "Well, we certainly didn't disobey the teacher." "And how do you come to that conclusion?" "We were told that we would be suspended if we were to walk out the door, and we never did. But I think it's fair to point out we were never told we couldn't jump out the window, which we actually did instead." The principal removes his glasses, displaying a superhuman effort to contain a, no doubt, immense rage. "You will possibly make a good lawyer one day. However, today is not that day. Get out of my sight." Next story. Not a teacher, but a memory from high school. Freshman history class. I'm sitting in the back with my bud, and I got the idea to whisper "mass debate" in my bud's ear next to me. So I do. Once, then again a few minutes later. And again a few minutes later after that. I lather, rinse, repeat the whole same thing. Mass debate. After about 12 minutes, he goes, "Dude, shut up." And the teacher goes, "Hey, you two, stop talking. He keeps whispering mass debate in my ear." The room burst into laughter, including the teacher, and amazingly, neither of us were punished. But I was known as the classroom mass debater for the rest of the year. I didn't get a lot of chicks that way. Next story. I know this will probably get buried in the comments, but I was teaching a biology mentoring summer camp during grad school for high school students interested in healthcare. Most of the students were middle to upper middle class kids who came to the summer camp with all of the electronics that you can imagine. One day, we gave the kids an assignment to create their own resume so that they could use it as a template. The day after it was due, I was called to the coordinator's office where they requested me to speak to one of the students. They told me he clearly didn't follow the template and all of his margins were off. They instructed me to tell him to make sure he follows directions. I went to the kid and he told me that he didn't have a laptop and he stayed up all night on his flip phone so that he could complete the assignment via text message. He texted it to one of the other students so that they could print it for him, and he was too embarrassed to ask for help. This is the type of phone where you have to hit a certain number multiple times to try and get the correct letter. I was so impressed I worked with him during that day's lunch period to get the resume completed the right way on my laptop. I was so impressed because he was so committed and unwilling to request help. I just told him that as you age, you'll know that you can't do it on your own. I kept in contact with the kid and he finished top of his class at University of Maryland and is set to complete his doctorate of pharmacy next year. I always think about that kid, but he really is impressive. He had to skip lunch so that he could redo it, but he was overjoyed for the opportunity. Next story. I don't know if this counts, but when I was in 3rd grade, one kid called me something along the lines of a brainless female dog. So, to F with him a bit, I said that I'm going to tell the teacher. When he said that I definitely won't, I wanted to prove him wrong and went to the office, followed by him begging me to stop. The teacher asked him where he learned such words, and I spit out, "That's what they call him back home." And you could see her choking on her laughter when she paused for a moment with that painful, I'm not smiling, sort of smile. Dude was also mentally handicapped pretty severely and had a jerkhead brother, so my comeback, despite being cruel, could be very much on point. I'm sure she realized that. She didn't say much later, just that I'll need to stay a while after school to do some extra work and that surely I should understand why. Next story. I was the student. I got attacked by 3 classmates and beat the crap out of them with a broom I used as a staff. My teacher was like, "Although they started it and there was 3 of them, I still have to talk to you and tell you can't do that because someone could have been seriously hurt. And because I'm a teacher, I could never tell you that they deserved it, and I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." But read between the lines. Guy was the best teacher I ever had for every reason. He was smart, but he was also so good with us he knew exactly what we needed in our lives and he delivered. He was like the father I never had. Next story. Not the teacher, but was the student at the time. 11th grade, AP Biology. So, my best friend at the time and I were always lab partners for everything. While doing the dissection on the cat, not sure if it is still done or not, but back in the early 90s, we did it. We of course partnered up. Now we had a few squeamish girls in the class with us and we wanted to prank them. So proceed to go out, buy some rubber insects, and came up with the idea on how to prank them. We went and asked our teacher if we could put one of the rubber flies inside of their cat right where they would be cutting the next day. He, of course, refused. Absolutely. Okay, just straight out told us we couldn't do that. We were disappointed, but in typical teen fashion, we realized that he didn't forbid us from putting a rubber cockroach there, only the rubber fly. So we get back to where the cats were kept, found the one that belonged to them, and managed to get the roach put into where they would be cutting. We figured it would just fall out on the table, and that would be the end of it, right? Nope. We apparently had it placed in there perfectly so that when they cut, it actually popped out and moved across the table a little bit. One girl screamed, another ran out of the room, and the third puked in a trash can. Needless to say, the teacher immediately knew who it was and yelled, "You guys, get your butts to the back room." We were expecting to be punished, but about 4 minutes later he comes back, slams the door, looks at us, and just busts out laughing. No punishment was had, but could have been in a lot of trouble. Next story. It wasn't so much a single impressive event as it was just perfectly executed every time. This kid, Jordan, could teach a masterclass on roasting his classmates. It was staggering how quickly he could rattle off an absolute shredded burn in response to something they said or did. And he did it in such a way that even the recipient would be in a state of awe at it. He was like the anti-hero, whose primary weapon was incinerating people with words. Of course, as a teacher, I couldn't just let it happen, and had to put on my poker face and ride it up, but there were some times where he'd roast some kid on something that was very valid. He'd say the type of thing that in any other environment, where I wasn't having to lead by example, I'd just have to say, "Dang, I mean, he got you there." Like, I remember in one example, he basically called out this other kid for creeping on a girl in class. The exact wording escapes me, but he basically called him a peeping Tom and was 100% accurate. The class exploded in laughter, and this kid looked like he'd been hit in the head with a frying pan. Absolute stunner. It took all of my self-control not to burst out laughing too, and to top it all off, it never felt overly malicious, like there was always this slight uptick in the delivery that softened the blow just enough that your immediate response wasn't anger. It was honestly not terribly surprising though, because Jordan was also brilliantly talented as a writer, and was exceptionally smart and witty. Roasting his classmates aside, he was very eloquent, without it feeling performative or fake. I almost wish he'd been a worse writer, so it'd have been easier to steer his creativity from roasting people into something else. But he had no shortage of mental real estate for both. I ended up losing track of him after I left, but I've no doubt that he's successful in whatever he's doing now. That or he was just Loki in disguise.
Boy, you are a trace.
Or wait, unless they mean the Loki from Marvel. Or Norse mythology in general. But every time I hear Loki now, dude, I think of God of War. Next story. Not me, but my mom had to punish a kid who hacked into his teacher's email as an April Fool's prank and told all of her students to bring a jar of peanut butter to class the next day. Apparently, a bunch of these kids didn't even have peanut butter in their house and had to go and buy it. My mom was very reluctant to punish him, but parents were so furious that she ended up giving him a few detentions. I know that she made sure to tell him how funny she thought the whole thing was, however. Next story. Not a teacher, but it's actually something I did. In high school, I made fake report cards and sold them for 4 years straight. I personally got caught because senior final report cards are mailed, and unfortunately my father intercepted it before I could get it from the mailbox. It was a Saturday morning, and I had just woken up. My mom informed me that my father was at the school dealing with an issue with my report card, and I instantly felt sick to my stomach. Yeah. When he came home, he wasn't even mad because realistically, my grades weren't that bad, but I was basically giving myself straight A's, B's when I was indeed getting a C in some class, and he said that the principal and counselor mentioned that these were the absolute best fake report cards he'd ever seen. I was even asked for information on how I made them without triggering the security watermarks behind the print. My father brought me back to the school to apologize and show them how I did it. I made a lot of money and didn't even get into trouble. It felt really weird, and my father and I joke about it to this day. I also work in IT now. Next story. My school hired 2 really bad teachers last year to teach math and ELA as part of my 6th grade team. One hated kids, Miss Trunchbull-esque. The other was just genuinely so bad at her job, couldn't control a classroom, made questionable life decisions, microwaved fish in the classroom, then covered the smell with peppermint oil, and never gave kids a second chance. Once you were on her bad side, you stayed there. Anyway, her class was rowdy as ever, and as the team lead, I'd stop in and check on the kids every once in a while to help maintain some semblance of peace. But this day I checked in too late, and one kid was up on his chair, captain style, listing off all the ways that this particular teacher was terrible, and how she was picking on certain kids. While impressive, I did have to pull the kid from class, which resulted in a detention. We spent the detention going over homework, playing cards, and watching a high school soccer game. Next story. My students had one kid distract me while I was grading tests, and another took a photo of the answer key. They thought it was like Mission Impossible. I realized when I graded their tests, there were so many that I suspected weren't ready, I was going to let them work through corrections for credit back. Well, too many did better on this than they should have. One kid in particular, who constantly made D's no matter what I tried, made a B, okay? The next day, the whole class had an open response quiz on the same material, only 3 questions. After that, those kids would narc on each other left and right. Next story. Fairly minor compared to some of these posts, ITT, but I did have a kid jump out the window of my class because I saw a Canadian goose outside. They don't have Canadian geese in China. I imagine they have Chinese geese over there. Anyway, he learned that Canadian geese aren't as welcoming and friendly as Canadian people. Oof. Geese are trouble in general. The only way to possibly deal with them is with a bunch of baby ducks and just going, step off! Whoa! Next story. I'm an English teacher in Spain, and one of my students, 8 years old, started screaming and cursing at another student in near-perfect English. I was so impressed by his pronunciation and use of the various abusive terms, I almost gave him a house point, until I remembered I'm meant to be a responsible professional. Next story. In one of my music classes, I had a girl who had serious behavior issues, but was generally a nice girl and she liked music. She didn't really play anything, but she liked to hang out and just listen. Another student, nice kid, but ADHD to the max, had just learned the opening riff to Crazy Train and literally couldn't stop noodling it on his guitar constantly. We were getting class going and I had everyone quiet except for this kid who was effing crazy training away. He literally could not help himself. My girl started to get mad that he wasn't listening, so she said, "If you don't shut up right now, I'm going to break that guitar over your effing head." And she just deadpanned it in a voice that made it clear that she would absolutely do it. And he stopped. I ignored it at the time, but we did talk about trying to express ourselves in a less, threatening manner in the future after class was over. Next story. From a student's perspective, kid was told to take his hat off, so he bet if he could flip it onto someone else's head, he could keep it. Does the trick. Then the teacher was like, "Okay, that was impressive, but you're still gonna have to take it off." Next story. Not a teacher, but witnessed my friend do something awesome. When I was in junior high, you could buy lunch tickets to get lunch. Lunch tickets were $1.75 each unless you were on reduced lunch. Then they were like 10 cents each. Around there, I don't remember the exact amount, but considerably cheaper than full price. It was also a madhouse trying to purchase lunch tickets because the line was exceptionally long. It took forever. My friend saw an opportunity. His mother gave him like $50 a month to buy lunch tickets at $1.75 each, and he had a buddy that was on the reduced lunch program. He gave his buddy his $50, had him buy lunch tickets at 10 cents each, then would sell his tickets like a quarter cheaper than the school did. It was great. Cheaper lunch tickets, and you didn't have to wait in that god-awful line. My friend turned quite a profit from this and apparently contributed greatly to his first PlayStation. It did eventually attract the school's attention, though, and he was punished. Unfortunately, I don't remember what his punishment was for selling scalped lunch tickets. I mean, are they really scalped tickets if you're selling them cheaper than the base price? It's not like they bought them all up and then extorted people for a quarter higher. Sounds to me like they just took advantage of a faulty system. Good on you, businessman. In all honesty, though, dude, I can't help but wonder where these kids are ending up for being so savvy at a young age. Junior high for me, dude, I was still trying to figure out how to decorate my igloo in Club Penguin. Next story. Back in the day, old school, pun intended, massive heavy TV with microwave oven-sized VCR on one side of those big black metal and plastic trolley things. I'm dragging this thing down a long corridor, and it's really heavy and not really under my control. I'm 5 feet tall on a good day. I turn around and there's this hulking 6-foot year 11 kid taking a ride on it. I said, "Get off now! You could damage this equipment. How much do you think that this is worth? Your parents will not be pleased having to pay to replace it." He gave it a pensive once-over and said, "About 15 quid. I gave it a quick appraisal and could only agree with him, unfortunately. His punishment, taking it back to the storeroom for me and missing the beginning of some lesson that he probably hated. Next story. Camp counselor, about 15 years ago. Everyone was playing in the gym, and a couple of kids, maybe 10 years old, got into an argument, so I went over to moderate. One of them was a bit of a troublemaker and probably one of the wittiest kids I've ever met. I'm talking super sharp. This kid took off his shoe mid-sentence without any effort and yelled, "Check this out!" and hucked it across the gym. When everyone turned around to see where it was going to land, including me, in that split second, he was sitting on the kid he was arguing with and started doing the quit hitting yourself bit. I couldn't help but laugh a little. It was a pretty good move, but he still had to be sent home. Next story. My paper crafts. I had that habit for a while before I ran out of ideas. It all started with a dinosaur, a paper dinosaur, made out of sheets from my physics book. Unused sheets, okay, no need to worry. It somehow helped me focus. If I didn't have something to do with my hands, I'd lose concentration, possibly falling asleep during class. It became some sort of fame. Some people would ask me to make stuff for them. I even tried to open a business at one point. I made a paper Rubik's Cube that theoretically works, but I only managed to turn 2 sides before it fell into pieces. I made a paper puzzle, where you have to roll a ball through a maze without falling in the holes. I made fans. Many fans. Last few school days really makes me need it. Some were just typical zigzag paper fans. I don't know what they're really called, but some were attached to a pen that would just spin between your hands. Really useful. With an ultimate mechanical fan with rotating paper blades that would work by pulling a strip rolled on the base. With its latest version, where I won't even bother pulling the strip, gravity would do it. And lately, some game characters. So on these times where my teacher would get mad at me for not paying attention, in very few cases, they would just take them from the top of my desk and dropping them in the bin, while making sure I won't try to get them back. You probably got what I mean. My classmates' reaction almost makes them regret it. Next story. I'm not a teacher, but this story is from my time in high school. A quiet freshman girl was being picked on by a kid sitting in front of her, and he kept at it after being told to stop. So she looked at him and said, "If you call me that again, I'm going to stab you with a pair of scissors." Well, the boy called her the name again, so she calmly got up, grabbed a pair of scissors off the teacher's desk, walked back to her own desk, and stabbed the kid in the hand with the scissors. Then, without saying anything, just gathered her backpack and walked out of school. The police eventually caught her walking home, and she got in a lot of trouble. But I've always been on her side on that one. Next story. I'm not a teacher, but this happened when I was a kid. Apparently, I have always been tech-savvy, and one day I was upset enough to change all the screensavers in the school computer lab to F, the name of the school. Apparently, they couldn't figure out how to change it back. I must have added a password or something, but my parents have told me that they had to punish me, but they secretly thought it was hilarious. Next story. When I went to school back in the late 80s and 90s, we had a small fire in the girls' school toilets. One girl was smoking and decided to put her cigarette out on the toilet roll holder, which ended up burning down the toilet block. After the firemen had to put the fire out, got a lecture from our deputy head, a huge South African man that didn't put up with any crap. He was so strict, someone had drawn a swastika on his door that no one messed with him. He started shouting at us. He was so angry his face was nearly purple. He said, "I will not have idiots in my school." That was when one boy decided to randomly shout back, "You'd better get out then." I saw some of the teachers' faces. We had just had a fire. Everyone had to evacuate the building. The emergency services had been called out. And he decided he was going to choice that moment to call him out. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone went silent. Everyone was shocked. He was called to the front to await his fate after we were allowed to go. It was a small act of rebellion, but the timing made him into a living legend. Next story. I have a story. I was the student. In middle school, our school had a snack shack they ran at breakfast and lunch where they sold the cosmic brownies, Nutty Buddies, Rice Krispie treats, etc. I figured out if I bought cosmic brownies at Safeway, sold them for less than the snack shack, I would make a profit. And everyone who knew would buy from me because it's cheaper. I was selling about 20 a day for months. The school naturally figured out something was up when one day cosmic brownies were the top seller, but next to nobody was buying them. Eventually, the school found out and was going to catch me red-handed. The next day to get me in trouble, but thankfully I found out that they found out first and decided to go out with a bang. There was a school dance that day, so I brought 100 brownies and made sure the school never even sold one. After that, I ended up reaching my goal of having enough money to buy a Nintendo Switch. The school waited a few days before talking to me as they finally realized I'd stopped and they couldn't catch me in the act. I had read up on the handbook and couldn't find anything that I was doing against the rules, so I argued with the principal. Eventually, he just said if I was ever caught doing it again, it's a suspension. The school then changed a bunch of rules to prevent something like that from ever happening again, so yep, that's the kind of impact I had on my school. Next story. My brother was in a jewelry making class in high school. There was an event that student submissions went on exhibit at a local art gallery, pretty well-known exhibit in the area. Well, my brother was slick and made a high-concept ring, but instead of a stone setting it, it was an empty dish. On the side of the ring was a nice clean copper accent. My brother showed it to the class. Everyone loved it. Even the teacher praised it. The class took a vote, and his ring didn't just make the cut, he got the most student votes. It wasn't until the submission for the name of the piece, Green Leaf, that the teacher realized that they were sending out drug paraphernalia to an art exhibit. It was too late to pull, though. The exhibit had the piece and needed to make a nameplate. Of course, every student knew, and that's why they voted for it. The worst my brother got was that better have not been used. Next story. This one is sort of the other way around. I was 7 months pregnant, but being very short, I looked like I should have given birth the month previous. Not a great look. I'm teaching a year 11 class, and I like to think that I was pretty chilled out for a teacher. One of my students, who was a kind of cool surfer dude, said something completely innocuous but cheeky about something I'd said. I can't remember what it was right now, but I just started shouting. I sent him out, followed him, shouting all the way, and stood in the corridor still shouting at him. What was super weird was I could hear in my head, "This is not right. I have no idea why you're acting like this." But I was in too deep and I just carried on. He turns around and runs down the corridor. I was left standing there feeling like, oh crap. For doing that, upsetting him, thinking I might actually be in trouble for my outburst now. I go back in. My class is sat in silence, wide-eyed. I carry on with the lesson as best as I can. 5 minutes later, the deputy head appears at my door. "Miss, may I have a word?" I left the room sheepishly and wondered what my punishment would be. "I've just had the student come down to my office. He's very worried about you." It was one of the nicest things that my student cared about me. Obviously realized this isn't like her and went to get help rather than being angry and upset on his own behalf. I grinned and said, "Hormones," and that was that. Apart from me taking that lovely person aside, the student, not the deputy head, to thank him when I next saw him and obviously to apologize. Such craziness never happened again during my teaching while being pregnant, and to this day I have no idea what came over me. This was years ago, but I still think about that young man's maturity a lot, and it made me value then all the more in my teaching the importance of building good relationships with my students. Next story. Back when bottle flipping was in vogue, a few kids outside my room, portable, so outdoors, were trying to flip a bottle onto a lamppost. I walk out to, shoo them off. One student sees me but then turns back to the post to make his throw. I call out, "If you miss, it's a detention." He doesn't turn around, but I can see that he hesitates for a few seconds. Then he decides to let it go. 30 feet into the air with me, him, and his friends all watching, and the bottle lands perfectly on top of the post. He and his friends all turned to look at me. I just put my hands up and walked back into my classroom. I hear them erupt into cheers as my door closes. I hope that's a good old school memory for him. Oh boy, sometimes you play with fate and sometimes you win. Very rarely, but you know what? You have to appreciate the risk. Other than that, guys, that concludes our stories of notorious and laborious troublemakers throughout the school and educational system that are just so dang impressive and savvy that you can't help but smile, grin, and go, hey, tip of the cap. But if you guys have any stories from your school and your upbringing that you would like to share, feel free to drop those down below in the comments because we love hearing them and we love reading them. And as always, I appreciate you hanging out with me, and we will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.